Hey class, it's week 5 and I'll be delivering a video lecture on chapter 4, Love and Loving Relationships. I'm reminded that it's a perfect time to be talking about love with Valentine's Day coming up this Friday. So happy early Valentine's Day to each of you if you celebrate the holiday. For many people, it's a day to just spread love, not just romantically with your partner or your spouse, but with family, friends, anyone whom you love, showing that. So, in honor of upcoming Valentine's Day, we'll talk about love and all its complexities and how we've attempted to define what love is in relationships and some of the research on theories about love, ideas about how love develops, or how it evolves as well through relationships. And the perfect way to get started is probably starting with a definition. So I'm going to start with Merriam-Webster's definition from your reading on what love is. So the dictionary defines love as three components, one or three different components. One, a strong affection for one another arising out of kinship or personal ties. Two, affection based on sexual desire. Three, affection based on admiration, benevolence, or common interest. So love can include all these three different aspects. But I just want to start by saying love is an interesting concept in that it's so fundamental to what it means to be a human. It's such a fundamental part of life for people universally. And it's a universal concept that's embraced and accepted, yet it's kind of difficult at times to find that one size fits all description of love. And as you can see, the definition is one place to start, but we'll just peel back the layers of all the different ways we can define love and what it means. It's kind of been agreed upon that love, at its kind of core, is an enduring bond between two or more people. Also, that it's based on affection and emotion. And finally, that it typically involves a feeling of obligation towards one another or between one another, which just means you're invested in the well being of that other person or their needs. Um, for family sciences and family studies, one of the best places to start with understanding love is talking about attachments, love as an attachment. We have two researchers that have shaped our understanding of what attachments mean in relationships. That's Mary Ainsworth and John Bowlby. So, John Bowlby was a researcher that came up with the theory of attachments. And basically, that theory states that our earliest experiences as infants, when we're babies, shape our relationships throughout our lives. So, whatever those attachments looks like early on for us as children, they often influence what our future relationships look like and how we approach them. For Mary Ainsworth, she was another researcher who basically put John Bowlby's theory to the test through an experiment where she observed different infants and their relationships with their mother. And she found that based on interactions between mothers and their babies, three different forms of attachment arise. So those different forms of attachment are secure attachment, anxious ambivalent, and avoidant. So for secure attachment, she noticed that babies would leave their mothers to go play, but then they'd often come back to touch base with them, spend time with them, and then go back and play. They had this kind of healthy balance of like leaving and returning and having positive emotions with those interactions. For babies that were anxious and ambivalent, they noticed that it was at times difficult for them to leave their mother to like branch off and explore, or that they would reject their mother when upon their mother returning. There was kind of this tension between the relationship of like come close, push away, kind of like tension there. And then for avoidant, you can imagine babies just didn't show any sort of like attachment to their mother at all, and kind of would just ignore their presence or didn't like acknowledge their presence. And obviously, each of those attachments can be for a variety of reasons and experiences between the mother, or but Mary Ainsworth found that there were three different types of those attachment styles. And then with further research, we found that those attachment styles can also be translated to adult romantic attachment styles that are also named secure, anxious, ambivalent, and avoidant, but they look different in adult relationships. So your book gives some helpful examples of what each of those are kind of described as. For example, secure attachments say, might someone with a secure attachment might say, I find it easy to get close to others. I generally don't worry about being abandoned. Anxious ambivalent attachment, someone might say, I often worry that my partner doesn't really love me or won't stay with me. Or I find it hard to get close to a partner quick. I'm sorry. Yeah, I tend to get close to a partner maybe too quickly and maybe even before they do. And then finally, avoided attachments are like, I'm not comfortable with getting close to anyone. Um, it may make me really nervous to get close to someone in that way, or I feel more comfortable being on my own. So, those are the three types of attachment styles. And attachment is just an idea of how we relate to a person within a relationship and how that traces back to our early experiences as a child. Um, So now we'll talk about the history of love and different images throughout history of what love looked like and how it's kind of evolved with time, our understanding, our ideas, norms around love, different things we've put emphasis on the past. And your author started with tracing back to Greek and Roman mythology and ideas about love during that time. And also pointing out that love has not always been a prerequisite for marriage. So we often today think of love and marriage being one and the same, and you needing both, right? You needing love to be within a marriage, but that was not always the case historically for how we viewed love. So when we trace back to Greek and Roman theology or mythology, sorry, passion and admiration did not often were not often associated with marriage. And so, actually, for a lot of people, love between two men was viewed as the most idealized form of love because at that time, women were viewed as being intellectually inferior to men. And so, you probably heard of philosophers like Plato would often write about love between two men being the highest form of true love. Then, when we look at early Christianity, it was very different than what we see in Greek and Roman mythology, where erotic sexuality was seen as immoral, and also any sort of sexual relations outside of marriage were seen as considered immoral. And marriage was more defined as kind of for its practical benefits, especially its economic and financial benefits. Then, if we fast forward to the Middle Ages, when society was very stratified, which just means that it was like kind of split in these different classes, that we had the ideas of courtly love emerging. And it makes me always think of the show Bridgerton. I don't know if any of you have seen that, where there's these traditions and things that you do activities around courting and developing love. And during this time, love was something that was seen as an ideal for people who are of upper class. And so the royal court had a lot of time to like do these sorts of activities to match people and families and develop marriages. And this was also the time where the idea of chivalry came from as well. When we get to the 18th and 19th century, that's when we really see the romance aspect of love being emphasized. People began to value their partner having similarities to them, and also sexual expression was more important, and as well as having like more of the emotional side of love. was emphasized during that time. Then during the Victorian period and also following the Industrial Revolution short after, we saw how, in terms of love, sexuality was really tied to family and reproduction. So during that time, people were moving from the rural areas to more urban areas. People were working more in factories. Things were becoming more gendered in terms of roles. So men were spending a lot of time outside of the home working in factories, and women became heads of the household. And that's where ideas about love begin to become very gendered as well. And love and sexuality tied to like reproducing and growing the family were like when some of those ideas were very prevalent. Then, of course, the 20th and the 20th first century, which we are in now, I believe, the 21st century, when we see a lot of social and political changes that have happened and affect around, have changed our ideas and norms around sexuality. And we finally see the importance of where love is connected to marital bond. So for a lot of people, love is a mandatory thing for entering marriage and for having a good relationship most of the time. That's most of the case. So I hope you all can see through those like different historical periods how love and ideas around sexuality and how we date and what marriage looks like has kind of like evolved and changed. So moving on past history, we're going to talk a little bit about briefly about contemporary ideas of love, more modern ideas of love. And there's two terms that I want to introduce you to that your chapter highlights. That's romantic love and companionate love. So for romantic love, you can think of how love is characterized by a lot of passion, melodrama, and quite frankly, media attention. So when I think about romance in media and culture now, I think of the show The Bachelor. If any of you have watched that, I've actually don't have never really watched it. I haven't watched it that frequently. I've seen maybe an episode or two, but I've seen enough from the outside to like pick up on it's these big grand gestures of romance and love and dating and finding the one and your one true love. So that's become a big part of our culture in terms of romance. And many people find that um, when they experience that romance on the forefront of a relationship, it tends to decline over time. But we still feel like, many of us do feel like romance is a prerequisite for getting married as well. And so the authors bring that out, how that's an interesting thing of romance being something that doesn't always last, but many of us feel like it's a crucial part of a relationship. So this other term comes in that kind of explains how marriages and relationships maybe last long term when romance dies or it ends, or it pauses. That's companionate love. So, companionate love is a strong commitment in terms of friendship and trust over time, and it's the idea that love is unconditional. It's the idea as well that you have a deeper knowledge of a person and a connectedness to them in terms of support, maybe even having the shared history. Um, it's often the idea that you need a mixture of both is helpful because companionate seems like the more long term lasting foundation that gets developed in love, but romance is that spark and that connection and chemistry that begin at the forefront. I thought these ideas are interesting because, as I've shared with you all, I'm a marriage and family therapist, so I work with a lot of couples, and I'm often talking to couples who are well within their marriage, like 2 to 3 years, maybe have just started expanding their family, having kids, and talking about how that romance and that connection has died. Maybe it's to our culture and our ideas about how relationships should look, or just personally how people need to feel in relationships. But often they're coming to therapy to find ways to kind of develop companionate love, like that deeper aspect of their love, that maturity of their love after having had that honeymoon phase kind of end. So it's in my opinion that you do need both, and that romance can be found throughout a relationship long term. You just have to work at it. But companionate love is like more of that long lasting connectedness that maybe we're looking for after romance isn't as intense in the beginning. I often share with my couples too, as I'll share with you all, is helpful with marital satisfaction. Research has found that it's U-shaped, meaning that at the beginning of a relationship and marriage, satisfaction is at its highest. And then after like 2 to 5, 6 years, around that time frame, we see marital quality dip tremendously, especially around the time, if we're thinking of lifespan and milestones that are having, when couples begin to have kids, that can really take a toll on their connection because the relationship begins to be put more behind the scenes and kids are more on the forefront and parents are exhausted and having little time for each other. But we see that it's U-shaped because marital satisfaction will curve back up and satisfaction will increase over time. It may not return quite as high as it did in the beginning, and I think that's just the effect of when something is new, it's never new again per se, but maybe it's that companion and aspect of marriage where we are still finding ways to have romance and maturing our love, even if it's not experienced the same way as the beginning. So I thought I'd just share that with you all. So we'll move on to talking about now theoretical perspectives of love. I'm going to touch pretty briefly on these because I don't want to keep this lecture too long. I want to kind of be like an overview of the chapter for you all. But common theories on love explore in different ways. So those theories aren't meant to say there's one right way to explain how love is, but to simply give us kind of a broader perspective on different types of love. So, one way we look at love theoretically is from a sociobiology lens. It's the idea that all humans have this instinctive impulse to pass on their genetic material, and it suggests that biology is linked to the type of people we choose. For example, one study found that, um, I think it was they saw like 10,000 people, or they had 10,000 people in the study. They had a big sample of people. And they found that across 33 countries, physical attraction for men was rated the highest in terms of what they prioritized in relationship or dating and finding in a partner, and financial stability for women. So it's interesting how across cultures and amongst many people that we see men favoring physical attraction as being a higher priority and financial stability for women. And so basically scholars say this is kind of evidence of that biology, the biological need that is kind of different upon genders. Then there's the biochemical perspective, and that basically says that we're attracted to certain people or specific types of people, that we have a type in a way. And it says that the brain releases a lot of natural chemicals that give us this rush for sexual attraction and even for bonding as well. I thought this was really interesting. The three, I think they are, let me see, endorphins. Yeah. The three endorphins that are released in the brain as chemicals when we are sexually attracted to someone are dopamine, which is your reward, pleasure, motivation chemical, norepinephrine, which is adrenaline, that heart racing, pupils dilating, and then also, let me not butcher how to say this, phenylethylamine. Phenylethylamine is a nervous system stimulant. So that concoction of chemicals is what you feel in terms of a rush when you are attracted to someone. Then scholars have found that, well, they guess that after the excitement ends from those endorphins, we also release different endorphins that help maintain relationships. And those endorphins are actually similar to the chemical structure of morphine, and they help calm and reduce anxiety. So you may have seen studies out there that say giving your partner a hug is literally good for your physical health. And it's kind of true how emotions and the brain, the things that we can't really measure and touch, but then also physical aspects of being human connect when it comes to love. And last interesting fact I'd share with you from your readings was 12 areas of the brain actually are involved and light up, they found in studies, and work together that release this euphoria type of feeling. It's like a concoction of chemicals. So love is really involving almost every aspect of your brain, which is pretty interesting. Some strong stuff. So for micro level perspectives on love, that is how theories focus on the interpersonal nature of love and helps explain different styles of love. So, one example of a theory that is a micro level perspective is Sternberg's triangular theory of love. Um, this theory says that there are three components of love: intimacy, compassion, and commitment. And Sternberg's theory says that throughout the development or the evolution of a relationship, we put different emphasis on those three components at different times because, love changes. And he also theorized that the combination of those three components create some different forms of love and different types of love. So I'm going to read these off to you. I'm not going to define all of them. I'll leave those to you to like go back in your chapter and like look deeper into if you'd like to define them, but I at least want to read them to you. Um, we have non-love, empty love, liking, infatuated love, companionate love, which we just discussed, fatuous love, romantic love, and consummate love. Another theorist, if I'm saying that correctly, is John Lee's Styles of Love. And in that theory, there are 6 types of love that are used to define how couples are attracted to each other. Now, these I'm going to spend a little bit time to at least define and go into with you. And those 6 types of love are eros, storge, pragma, ludus, agape, and mania. And eros is kind of from that root word of what you think of eris. And it's like powerful physical and sexual attraction in terms of love. Storge represents a love that may begin as friends and then it slowly grows over time. Often, these types of couples don't experience a lot of highs and lows, but have a lot of mutual interests that connect them. Pragma love is rational, down to earth love. Um, for these couples, let's see, there's kind of like emphasis on similarities of what you may look for in a partner, such as like similar religious views or political views. It's kind of practical love, basically. Ludus is a playful, carefree type of love, which I'll mention later about something they found different between men and women, with men being more commonly experiencing ludus love. And then there's agape, which many of us have heard of, that kind of selfless, altruistic love that's unconditional. And finally, mania is a manic love, which is characterized by possessiveness, dependency, and jealousy. It's kind of, it may mean a high need for attention and affection. It makes me think of kind of those attachment styles that we talked about earlier and how that might show up for that type of love, a mania sort of love. And as you listen to these different definitions, you may think about people or relationships you know, or examples you've seen on TV or shows that describe those types of love or those types of attractions. Another theory we have is Reese's wheel theory of love. That's a developmental theory of love. So it's a theory that focuses on how love evolves over time and develops. There are 3 components to that one. Actually, there's 4. Sorry, I misspoke. There's 4. We have rapport, self-revelation, mutual dependency, and personality need fulfillment. So that's the idea that at the beginning we develop a rapport and a connection to someone, maybe a shared interest through time with them. Then there's self-revelation, which is when we become closer, we get more personal and vulnerable with that partner, and we become, yeah, we may even begin to have some fears and insecurities as we develop that vulnerability. Then the third one is mutual dependence. So we open ourselves to begin to depend more on our partner as they do on us. And then finally, there's a personality need fulfillment, which is the last stage that says couples begin to like just intertwine themselves completely, their lives, their jobs, their dependence on each other. They're making joint decisions, um, and supporting each other's goals and ambitions. I really like that theory. I think that one definitely stands true for what I see in my work with couples. And then finally, for theories on love, I'm going to share the macro level perspectives. And that's the idea that love is related to culture, social structure, race, class, and sex. All of those things influence our ideas about love. And instead of going into what the textbook has talked about on that, I just want to briefly share some of my experiences as well. I may have mentioned to you all too that I'm doing research right now, and my research focuses on Black couples and their experiences with racism, and their racial identity, and how that influences their dynamics in their relationship, the outcome we see for their satisfaction in their relationship, and even their ideas about love. So I just recently finished analyzing the results for this study. I talked to 7 Black couples. I did interviews with them together and asked them what their definitions of Black love is, because for this study, I was looking at how they define love in the context of culture and their race and those experiences with racism. And I thought I'd just share that with you all to give you a real life example of um, how we might define love, or how love is influenced by culture and society and our identities. So in this study, couples define Black love as a variety of different elements. One, they felt like Black love is commonly misrepresented in media, but there is a kind of a real way to doing Black love despite the negative stereotypes. Um, they describe Black love as a love that's not attention seeking, it's unconditional, goes beyond the status quo. Uh, they also shared that Black love is stronger when 2 people are together facing the adversity um, as a couple and can overcome that opposition. They describe Black love as a love that's kind of understood and doesn't need to be explained when it comes to those shared experiences around race and racism, and it's based on having maybe similar values around race and culture. They also shared that Black love means not having to adapt or conform who they are and their identity, but being authentically themselves with their partner. Um, Another definition was it's a generational gift to be passed down to future generations, and a force that has allowed the Black community to persevere despite historical and societal injustice. And finally, they said it's just the ability to experience love in general, but without negative interferences, such as like racial oppression or racism. And words that they've thrown in there are strong, resilient, deep, soulful, spiritual, and even sacred. So I just wanted to share those results with you all because I think you can see how their definitions of love are rooted deeply culturally in their experiences and shared experiences together. And I thought it was also perfect because it's Black History Month. So I'm like, I'll just throw in those results to share with you. So finally, what I'll wrap up on this lecture is a couple of facts of how we experience love that your chapter brings out. And when it comes to differences of how men and women experience love, research shows that despite common beliefs, men are just as interested in love as women are, even though they may express it in different ways. And research has shown us how those differences show up. So, for example, some evidence that that is a myth that women are more interested in love is that men tend to say, I love you first and fall quicker in relationships um, than women who fall maybe slower into relationships with love. Of course, there's always exceptions, but this is what they found more of the case for their study. They found that men show love, but in ways that aren't typically valued because of the feminization of love, which means um, the ways men express love, which may be through acts of service or more practical things that they do, and not so much words, that is looked at as not as much an expression of love. But what the study found is like they're just showing love in different ways, whereas women are really good at expressing it verbally and through that affection. Um, and then finally, we see that, especially for same sex couples, it's been found that how we define love, the importance of attachment, theoretical perspectives and experiences of love are generally the same as well for same sex couples. The biggest difference is that same sex couples, even the example I just gave for black couples, have different experiences around their identity, such as discrimination and injustice and abuse at times as well from society because of their minoritized identities. And so these things may shape around the ways they experience and define love in their relationships. Um, but generally, we're all the same, and from we're all the same in terms of at the core of what love means, that universal, uh, meaningful aspect of love is something that we kind of all have in common, even if on the outside there are just some nuances and some differences of how we may define it or experience it. But at the core, it's very similar. As they said, between like heterosexual couples, same sex couples kind of fall into the same definitions around love. There are more things covered on your chapter around unrequited love, jealousy, controlling behavior, and even breakups. But I want to keep this lecture brief. I see it's already 30 minutes. Um, so I'll stop it here. And you all have a great day.